People often say that courage announces itself in grand moments, on stages, in headlines, under flashing lights. But sometimes, courage awakens quietly. It rises not from applause, but from pain repeated too many times. From silence endured for too long. On that gray morning, Too Deep stood in the small courtyard of her rented house. The kind of place where days usually passed unnoticed. The ground was still cool with night dew. A thin layer of dust clung to everything: the walls, the old wooden bench, the basket of grapefruits resting by her feet. Her hands trembled slightly as she brushed the dust from the fruit. The movement was slow, almost mechanical. Her breathing was uneven, not because the work was heavy, but because something inside her chest was tightening. Gathering, preparing to break free. Deep had always been gentle. She was the kind of woman who lowered her eyes when scolded. Who apologized even when she wasn't wrong. The kind who absorbed blame quietly, believing peace was worth the cost of her own voice. For years, that softness had defined her. But that version of Too Deep was fading. Everything changed the moment James disappeared into silence, and pain became her teacher. That morning, her little niece sat beside her, swinging her legs back and forth while chewing on a piece of dried fruit. The child's movements were carefree, her world still untouched by adult grief. "Mamie Deep?" the girl asked softly, her voice small and sincere. "When will Uncle James come back?" Deep paused. The question struck her like a blade, sharp, sudden, familiar. It was the kind of pain she had learned to hide well, the kind she swallowed before it could reach her face. "He will come back," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "But only when he's safe." Safe. Such a simple word, yet it carried the weight of everything she had endured over the past months. James's father, Mr. Wan, was a man of wealth and influence, proud, immovable, merciless in his certainty that power was the same as love. He treated James not as a son, but as a burden. A problem. A disappointment to be corrected rather than a human being to be understood. His cruelty chased James into hiding. His coldness pushed James toward danger. And his authority forced Deep into a role she never asked for. The thought almost made her laugh bitterly. Protector. She was just a countryside girl. Someone who cried when her hands were scratched from harvesting corn. Someone whose biggest fears used to be storms and failed crops. And yet here she was, preparing to stand against a man whose power could crush her without effort. Strangely, she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Fear, she realized, was nothing compared to the thought of James suffering alone. She set the grapefruits aside, straightened her back, and wiped her hands on her old cotton pants. Her heartbeat slowed, not weaker, but steadier. More deliberate. She remembered James's voice, deep, gentle, always slightly tired. The way he told her she deserved better. The way he insisted she had strength she didn't yet know how to use. Maybe he never imagined she would use that strength for him. A breeze swept through the yard, carrying the faint scent of dust and early morning dew. Deep looked up at the sky, pale, quiet, endless. It felt as though the world itself was waiting for her decision. And in that moment, she whispered to herself, I will not let him suffer alone, not this time. What James didn't know, what Mr. Wan couldn't imagine, was that Too Deep was no longer the weak. Trembling girl they thought she was, silent. She was becoming a storm. Unstoppable. The next morning arrived with a heaviness that pressed against her chest. The sky was the color of bruised steel, the wind thick with the smell of rain, a warning. Or a reminder that storms often arrive quietly before they strike. Perhaps, her hands were steady, but her heart raced beneath her ribs. Deep packed a small bag. Today, she would do something no one expected from a poor village girl. Today, she would stand before Mr. Wan. As she tightened the strap of her bag, her niece looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. Mommy Deep, the child asked, are you going to find Uncle James? Deep crouched down. Brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead, and kissed her cheek. No, sweetheart, she said softly. Today, I'm going to protect him. Saying it aloud changed something inside her. The words made her feel taller. Stronger, as if courage had finally settled into her bones. Walking toward what terrifies you, she walked toward the main road. Dust rising around her feet with every step. Memories flooded her mind, the way James held her hands when she was trembling. The gentle way he encouraged her to read, to think, to believe she could be more than her past. Yet she gave him everything. She owed him nothing. Maybe that was what love did. It transformed fear into determination. By the time she reached the gate of the Wan family mansion, her pulse had become a wild drumbeat. The guards exchanged questioning looks. She was an odd sight among the polished marble walls and towering gates. Wan, she said, I need to meet Mr. Her voice trembled. Only at first. Something in her eyes, fierce, unwavering, made the guards step aside. A house that judges you inside, the mansion felt like another world. Silent hallways. Smooth floors. Too cold. Air too clean. Every step echoed sharply, as if the house itself was judging her presence. When she reached the study door, her heart pounded louder. He's behind this door, she thought. The man who hurt James. The man who believes he can crush anyone in his way. She inhaled deeply and pushed the door open. Juan looked up slowly. Mr. Irritation flickered across his face, then hardened into ice when he saw her. What are you doing here? Deep swallowed, but her voice came out steady. I came to talk about James. Silence filled the room, heavy, electric. He said, and I will not leave, she added softly but firmly. Until you hear me. Standing between fear and power, the silence stretched thin, like an old thread one pull away from snapping. Deep felt it press against her chest as she stood between James and the man who had cast a shadow over his entire life. The air smelled faintly of rain, usually a promise of renewal. Tonight, it felt like a warning. James said nothing. He stared at the floor, shoulders drawn in, fists tight. It was as if every storm he had ever endured was gathering behind his eyes. For a moment, Deep wondered what kind of pain it took for a son to fear the sound of his father's voice. Juan's gaze shifted to her. Mister, and who are you, he demanded, to interfere in matters that do not concern you? It wasn't the words that frightened her. It was how easily he said them. Deep lifted her chin. I'm someone who won't let you crush him anymore. Her own courage surprised her. Redefining strength, she had always believed bravery belonged to people who climbed mountains or stood on stages, not to someone who sold vegetables. Cooked simple meals, and laughed at small joys. But life has a strange way of revealing strength at the exact moment we fear we have none left. James looked up, eyes widening. He realized then, she wasn't standing beside him. You think you can protect him? Mister. She was standing for him. Deep stepped closer to James. Juan scoffed. He isn't weak, she said softly. He's tired. And tired people don't need judgment, she added. They need someone to believe in them. The room shifted. Even the rain outside softened, as if listening. Morning after the storm, morning arrived quietly. Slipping through the window like a shy visitor. Sunlight softened the sharp edges left from the night before. Deep woke first. She watched James sleeping on the couch, his brow still furrowed. As if fighting battles even in his dreams, she gently pulled the blanket up to his shoulders. Yet her hands trembled. Such a small gesture. When James opened his eyes, there was no fear, only relief. Of course, she replied. You stayed, he whispered. The lesson that remains. James confessed his fear. Deep listened. Outside, life went on, vendors calling, motorbikes starting, children laughing on their way to school, unaware that two hearts inside a small room were rewriting their futures. I won't walk away just because things are difficult, Deep said. You taught me how to be brave. Now let me stand with you. And in that moment, James learned something essential. Letting someone care for you is not weakness. It is healing.